there may have been a person involved with him who brought these teachings out of Egypt, and it became the religion of Judaism. And this is a major section of the book I'm writing now, that this gentleman was part Hebrew and Egyptian. Hebrews come from ancient Egypt, not from Asia, that they were part of the ancient 42 tribes of Kemet. The original Hebrews were African people, not Asiatic. He was both Hebrew and Egyptian and Semitic on the bloodlines I trace in the book. And after him was the Exodus. We date when the Exodus happened. And I give you historical documentation who Moses may have actually been. And let's go on, because we're going to show that. This gentleman is very important because he was one of Akhenaten's teachers, one of his major teachers. This statue is in the Cairo Museum. I can show you. And again, I'm striking a blow for diffusionism. Because not only did we show you the possibility that a Mayan may have been living in Egypt 3,300 years ago, look at this man's face. This is showing him as an old age. And this is part of the scribes. People always say, what is this thing sticking out? It's part of the... Thank you, Ted. This is part of the scribes' devices, that he was British scribe. But it's particular... You're not going to be able to hold it, so let it go. Okay. But it's particularly the pose. The seating pose, Hakim says, distinctly Asiatic. Now, we're talking about mass diffusionism at this point, where people were coming from Asia to Africa, people from Africa were going to Asia. We say people who come from Europe, maybe the Americas, Amaya, were all coming into this dynastic Kemet period, infusing. This gentleman's face is clearly Asiatic, and I say possibly Tibetan. Is this possible as evidence that a pre-Tibetan individual was living in Africa 3,300 years ago? It's quite distinct. What is certain about this gentleman, he also had the title Amenhotep. Now, I said, wait a minute, offering to the darkness? But they also gave him the title son of Hapi, or child of Hapi. Hapi was the netter of the Nile. Hapi is often depicted as a male face with female breasts, because the Nile, the water is hermaphroditic, containing both masculine and feminine energies, the harmony of both. So by giving him the title child of the Nile, they were saying that this man was an enlightened master, a great teacher.
You know, Stephen, that is called the Kuzuo posture, where you're kneeling with your hands down. And at Tiwanaku and Easter Island,
great.
Olmecs,
Great.
That's a very curious, yeah.
And Hakim says distinctly Asiatic. That's not the way people in Africa sit.
Oh, okay.
So it's
a lot of, like, and Mesoamerica say.
Great, David. Thanks.
You've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, go. Okay, more of this lineage. This is that gentleman Akhenaten's maternal grandfather, known as Yuya. His tomb was found in 1907. A great book, which I don't know if you carry Osman's first book, Stranger in the Valley of the Kings, but it's a great book to read. I recommend Osman's work. Ahmed Osman, very strong. David has his other books. He wrote a book of Stranger in the Valley of the Kings. Why? This individual was the only individual of non-royal lineage who's buried with the kings in the Valley of the Kings. Why? His daughter, Akhenaten's mother, married Akhenaten's father and became king. So he was known as the father-in-law of the king. Well, why he's important is, I'm telling you, and I agree with Osman completely, that this gentleman was the biblical patriarch Joseph. Here we get the patriarchs coming into Egyptian history, which Ralph Ellis, who David carries his books, talks about a lot. This gentleman with a very distinctly Semitic nose was not Commission, was from Asia probably, and we put Mitanni as actually being northern Syria. Just a little difference there. But this is where he came from. He was definitely Semitic. So here we have a linkage, which I'm going to talk about in my book in detail. Semitic traditions coming into Kemet, merging with Akhenaten's traditions, which is what became Judaism. So this man, I say, is an early Semite, whose maternal grandfather of Akhenaten, who brought in the Semitic teachings. His name, Yuya, actually relates to Yosef, Joseph. Next. I'm just giving you a tease here so you read the second book. Here is Moses, though, folks. Hakim took me to Akhetaten, Amarna today it's called, in 1998. We went into a particular tomb, which he said was important for me, of the vizier of Akhenaten. Vizier meaning the man that was like prime minister, who's like in charge. But he said this particular gentleman who had the title Ramos, again, Ramos. It's a title. Ramisu, actually, in the ancient language, means Misu means reincarnation. A reincarnation of the second stage of the sun. Again, it was just a title. This is his tomb. Hakim said this gentleman was important because he was a fan bearer of the king. Well, people always say, did he just worship the king and wave the fan? No, he said no. It also meant he had the ear of the king, which means he was a very close confidant, where he was totally part of Akhenaten's system of teachings. I say, folks, the Greeks would have called him Ramosis, and that's where Moses comes from. No matter what, Egyptologists go through all these gymnastics to try to come up where the name Moses comes from. They are taught in Judaism that Moses meant Moshe, which meant to draw out of the water, that the daughter of the king found this little baby in a reed basket and pulled him out. But why would an Egyptian woman be speaking Hebrew, a language that didn't exist for thousands of years until later? So Moshe, which means to draw out in Hebrew, has nothing to do with Moses. Moses is Misu, which means rebirth, and here he is, Ramos, the vizier of Akhenaten. I'm speculating in this current book, this is Moses, a historical figure, which up until now has only been a myth. And it is my bias that every myth has a basis in historical fact of a person and event. Next. Here he is again. Okay, here's very important. You don't see this clearly, but here, Hakim pointed this out very clearly, are the 12 tribes of Hebrews in Moses' tomb, to show that before there were 12 tribes of Israelites, and in my book, I make a distinct difference between the words Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew. They are not the same people. Even though every Jew today practices Judaism, they are not the same people. And you'll have to read the book to find out why. But here, clearly, Hakim tells us the 12 original tribes of Hebrews were part of the 42 tribes of Kemet. And here they are depicted on the wall in Ramos' tomb. Next. And this is Akhenaten's great-great-grandfather, known as Tutmosis III title. He's very important because I have a major chapter in Rosicrucianism. Any of you who's interested in the true history of the Rosicrucian order, we deal with it in my book. Goes back to ancient Egypt. This man, by the Rosicrucians themselves today, is considered the traditional founder of the Rosicrucian order, going back to 1450 BC. Next. This is the man who was the modern imperator of the Rosicrucian order, Dr. Harvey Spencer Lewis, who founded the order in 1915 in New York City. I write in detail about him. He fulfilled a prophecy that was told to him in 1999 when he was initiated in France, where it was said it would be the reincarnated soul of Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, who would reestablish the Rosicrucian order in the land where the eagle spreads its wings. The symbol of the eagle spreads its wings is North and South America. He was given jurisdiction for the Rosicrucian order in North and South America. He then accepted the fact, he never paraded around and said it, that he might be a reincarnation of Akhenaten. He never made a big deal about it. He just accepted that he fulfilled the prophecy. And he never went on radio and television and said, I'm Akhenaten, folks. He never made a big deal about that. Next. And I'm done. Great. And actually, there was another slide I wanted to show, but I brought it to show you. One thing in passing, we wanted to go to the Ramesseum on this tour we were just at. The Ramesseum is at Medinet Habu. It's near Luxor. It supposedly was built in the 19th dynasty by Ramses II, dedicated to him. It actually is not. And it's a classic, and I have the picture to show you. It shows the Exodus on the walls. So there's always been a controversy that there's no documentation of the Exodus outside of the Old Testament. Wrong. We can show you the Exodus on the walls of Egyptian temples to show that it occurred in the time period we're saying. Okay, a couple of quick questions, because we're not going to interfere with Chris. Yes?
Wasn't there some pyramids at Machu?
This is what's called the collapsed pyramid. But we don't consider it as part of Buwizard because it was not a pernetter. So it's not an energy device. Again, they eventually started building these mastabas. Mastabas is just a stone bench. They started building them higher and higher until they resembled shapes of the pyramids that were already in existence, but they were glorified perkas, tombs. However, there's never evidence that anyone was ever buried in even these. So we think they were symbolic tombs, that they were never actually buried there. It's the so-called collapsed pyramid. I've been inside of it. We did sound experiments and it was flat. There was no resonance, no acoustics at all, like there is. Chris will talk about the harmonics of the Great Pyramid. Anybody else? You're so blown away, you have no questions. Thank you, folks.
That was great. Okay, we'll have a